The Ruby Sanctum, bastion of the red dragonflight, lies hidden under the Wyrmrest Temple within Dragonblight. This encounter features 3 mini-bosses and the final dragon, Halion. So, let's look at the tactics. First mini-boss Baltharus the Warborn. Tips for the tanks: tank Baltharus away from the raid to avoid his frontal cone attacks. Likewise, the off-tank on the mirror image will tank this away from the raid. DPS from behind or adjacent to avoid frontal cone attacks, including cleave. Tips for the damage: DPS from behind or adjacent to avoid frontal cone attacks, including cleave. Tips for the healers: watch out for the periodic whirlwind from the mirror image. Position accordingly to avoid this. Specific boss attacks: Baltharus will summon a mirror image. This image has all the same abilities, in addition to a powerful whirlwind attack. You will want to have your off-tank immediately pick this up and move him away from the raid. This image will periodically be re-summoned and should be killed as soon as possible each time. It's a good idea to mark Baltharus so you will not confuse him with the images. Second mini-boss Saviana Ragefire. Tips for the tanks: the tank should face the boss away from the raid to avoid breaths and other frontal attacks. Tips for the damage: DPS should be behind or adjacent to the boss, likewise avoiding frontal attacks. Tips for the healers: there is a lot of splash damage during the air phase, so this would be a good time for raid members to use cooldowns to reduce damage. In addition, healers should be prepared to lay down some AoE healing. Specific boss attacks: during the air phase Saviana will conflagrate 5 people, 2 people by picking them up and then dropping them. Saviana will periodically enrages, so you will want to have a hunter on the ready with tranquilizing shot. Saviana will also periodically cast Nova, so you want to have the raid spread out at least 10 yards. Third mini-boss General Zarithrian. Tips for the tanks: face away from the raid to avoid frontal attacks. Zarithrian also spawns a number of adds. These should be picked up by 1 to 2 additional off-tanks. Tips for the damage: like previously, all DPS should be behind or adjacent to the boss to avoid frontal attacks. Ranged DPS should focus on killing the adds, while melee DPS will focus on killing the Zarithrian. Tips for the healers: just like with Saviana, there is a lot of splash damage during the air phase, so healers should be prepared to increase healing to keep up. Specific boss attacks: Zarithrian will periodically cast Fear, so proper use of Tremor Totem, Fear Ward, and other fear breaking, preventing abilities will be necessary. Zarithrian's adds will be casting an AoE attack, which can and should be interrupted. Final boss Halion. Phase 1. As the encounter begins, Halion will summon a wall of fire in a circle around him. So make certain your raid is all together before beginning. Halion summons fireballs that fall from the sky. The location they will hit is marked by a graphic on the ground. Simply move out of the way. When they hit, they explode into fire patches on the ground that spread. Move away from these to avoid taking any damage. Halion will cast Mark of Combustion. When this is dispelled, it releases a fire patch on the ground. When a player is afflicted by this, they should run away from the main raid and then get dispelled. The longer it takes to dispel, the larger the fire patch will grow to, so time is key. Phase 1 ends when Halion reaches 75%. I will continue the tactics when Phase 2 begins. In the meantime, follow along to see how the battle is going. Phase 2. During this phase a portal will appear, the entire raid will enter. Halion will periodically cast Mark of Consumption, which behaves just like Mark of Combustion, except that it deals shadow damage. Raid members must run away from the group prior to getting dispelled. The most important, and fun thing. Here is the Shadow Orbs. 2 of these orbs will circle around the stage area. Periodically these beams will link up and deal enough damage to kill any player caught between them. For this reason the entire raid, including the tank, must continually rotate, maintaining a distance between the orbs in order to avoid taking this damage. Phase 2 ends when Halion reaches 50%. I will continue the tactics when Phase 3 begins. In the meantime, follow along to see how the battle is going. Phase 3. At 50% a new portal will open. At this point Halion will exist in both the physical realm and the Twilight realm. You must split your raid up in order to DPS down Halion in both realms. It's particularly important that your DPS is balanced across both realms. If Halion is not killed at the same rate in each realm, she will fade into one or the other realm and begin to regain health. You should send most of your ranged DPS back through the portal, as they will have an easier time dealing with the mark of combustion. Likewise, your melee DPS should remain where they are at, as the rotating beams will be easier for them to navigate without having to sacrifice their DPS. Specific for Phase 3. Phase 1 mechanics will take over for those who take the portal back to the physical realm, and Phase 2 mechanics will remain for those who stay in the Twilight realm. During this phase Halion will have a buff called Corporeality. This buff begins at 50%, which is its balanced state. As this percentage changes, Halion will deal and receive more damage in one realm and deal and receive less damage in the other. Dealing damage to Halion in one realm will cause the buff to decrease in that realm and increase in the other. Furthermore, he will begin to fade into the other realm where he will rapidly regain health if not deepsed.